Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and for the next hour we are going to talk about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and robots. So stay tuned, and hopefully you will enjoy the conversation as much as I anticipate that I'm going to enjoy it. If you have a question for one of our wonderful guests, you can give us a call at 781, I forgot the number again, 270-9199. I never call because I'm here, so give us a call. If you have a question for later on and you would like to email me with a suggestion for a future topic, you can always do that at talk@bcattv.org. Yeah, that's right. And as usual, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. And I want to thank everyone in the crew this evening. We have Colleen Moore, Director Extraordinaire, and Tatiana Hawkins and Maddie Shipka, the three of them have given up their Wednesday evening to come and spend the evening at BCAT. And we also have Kyle Ruffin and Corey McNeil, who are staff members here. And they help keep the station running and looking good. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank my husband Paul for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Hopefully it'll be a nice quiet evening. And now I would like to introduce my wonderful guests. Relax, breathe. We have Shannon Carey. We have Ashay Lukunde. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Close enough?
Close.
Okay. And Anusha Datar. Did I say that right?
Yes.
And all three of you are members of the Burlington Devilbotz. Did you guys get to come up with that name?
I wish.
That sounds so cool. Okay, I'm sorry. I digress already. So you can decide which order you'd like to answer these questions in. But first, I would like to get to know you guys a little bit better, as well as the audience. So can each one of you tell me a little bit about how and why you decided to get involved in the robotics team at at BHS?
So I joined robotics my freshman year because I was always interested in technology and stuff, but never got to really apply that anywhere. So
Okay.
I thought, why not join? And then I met a lot of nice people and was really inspired by all the cool stuff that we were doing, and I
Okay.
decided to stay.
Now, do you have to know all of the technology
No,
before? Oh, okay.
I knew nothing.
Okay. Cool. And you are a sophomore now?
I'm a sophomore now. Yeah.
Okay. Your turn. Or, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I started out in my freshman year at the BHS activity fair, and I saw the team's robotic arm just giving everyone a big surprise and making everyone just look in awe. And then
What does the robotic arm do?
It was for the competition before the year I started. It was called Logo Motion, and it was supposed to pick up inflatable versions of the first logo. First is the organization that our robotics team
And we'll talk
belongs
about
to.
that in a minute. Okay. Because I remember going to Celebrate Burlington, and the robot at that year was throwing frisbee. No, it was playing soccer.
Oh, yeah.
We have a different one at the Commons most every year.
Okay. And you are a senior right now.
I'm a senior, and I've been programming since I was in the 6th grade because my dad's a database architect with a healthcare organization. So from there, I knew I was interested in technology, and then once I saw the robotics, I was like, this could be something really cool. And my friends didn't really want to join, but then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it, see how it works out, and it was definitely the best decision I made in high school.
Now, do you want to study robotics in college next year, or database management, or?
I always knew that I liked computer science, so I'm majoring in computer science,
Okay.
and I'm going to UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin, for computer science, and they have this freshman research program, which if you are accepted into, you are guaranteed research as a freshman, and one of the research streams is robotics. So I was accepted into the program, and you need to sign up for the classes, but it's very likely, because I got early orientation, that I will be doing robotics research as a freshman.
Excellent.
So I'm really excited about that.
Go for it. Good resume builder. Your turn.
So I first got into robotics when I was in 7th grade. Almost on a whim, my parents decided that it would be good for me to try robotics, and I went to a summer camp and absolutely loved it. And ever since, I kept looking for more and more opportunities to do robotics and engineering and electronics and things like that. And I heard sometime in 8th grade that we had a robotics team, and I saw it at the Commons, and it was absolutely amazing, inspiring. And I joined my freshman year with a group of my friends, and they helped me stay in it. And I now have a leadership position there.
Excellent. So, do any of you guys know how long the robotics team has been an entity at BHS?
Yes, it's been here for 8 years. And before that, they did, so right now we do FRC, which is the highest level on that organization.
Okay.
First robotics competition.
Yeah, first.
What is it called?
First robotics competition is FRC.
Okay.
And there's multiple levels. There's actually 4 levels. There's Junior FLL, which is Junior First Lego League. And then there's FLL, First Lego League. And
Lego
then,
is in like the little Lego
Yep.
bricks?
Yes.
It's
They
robotics
have
with Legos.
Lego Mindstorms for anyone who might have used those. We actually mentor a team in our elementary and middle schools, and you build robots out of Lego parts and Lego Mindstorms and compete with them, though our teams in this town don't compete yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're hoping that that'll take off next year.
Oh,
In
okay.
my freshman year, we were only at one elementary school. Now we're trying to extend to all of them, and we're at the middle school, and hopefully they'll be competing by next year in middle
Cool.
school. And so going back to my original point, before FRC, our team did FTC, which is it's like our robotics, except it's not with Legos, it's with real materials, it's just on a smaller scale, and it's less expensive, and it's using, VEX materials, which is
Okay.
it's a different brand.
And FTC is First Tech Challenge. First being the overall organization that we're a part of, standing for inspiration and recognition of science and technology.
Oh, okay.
And
I
they're-
saw that on your website. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow.
It's a international, at this point, organization
Yes.
with thousands of teams,
Cool.
just in FRC alone. And it's an enormous organization, and it's come a long, long way.
Okay.
Our number is actually 2876, and that's supposed to be the number that you registered at. So we're supposed to be the 2,876th team registered. Right now there's
They're-
over 6,000.
Wow.
But some teams have dropped off. They weren't able to sustain themselves.
Oh,
But
okay.
there are
like
well
for funding
over.
or something?
Yeah.
Mainly,
A lot of
yeah.
reasons.
There's
Okay.
if a lot of the teams talk about having troubles either getting funding, mentors, or just being able to get space in their schools to work on it.
It's actually an enormous amount of money to enter these competitions, which is why we rely on our sponsors, and this year on our school board for help with that.
Now, do you guys have to go out and seek sponsors, or do you have advisors to do that?
It's
or-
all student-led. Everything in the club is supposed to be, everything
cool.
in First Robotics is supposed to be about the students. The mentors are there to help guide us. But
Okay.
we're supposed to be doing this on our own. And what we usually do is we find sponsors, we reach out to them.
Okay.
Whenever we hear of a new company, there's always one of us talking about, hey, maybe
Yeah,
they
like
could be a
Network
sponsor.
Drive just exploded, and like there's a whole bunch of companies over there now.
And in return for them giving us some sort of money or food donations, which we do take on some of our meetings, we'll put their name on our robot when we go into competition. So it's on the front. We'll put it on our website, on all sorts of things. We have a whole list of different benefits that they can get publicity-wise from us.
We also offer to go to their employees or their store to show off our robot and show their
Okay.
customers who they're supporting.
Oh,
And kind of,
neat.
it's a mutual benefit at that point.
Marketing!
Yeah.
Cool.
That's actually really awesome. We have a marketing division. So like
Okay, so it's not just about robots.
Yeah, so many of my friends who, when we were planning on joining the robotics team, were like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not sure if, building things and wiring things is really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you go there, and some of my friends who are interested in business are actually heavily involved with the marketing and these things, so they're getting real life experience.
Now, is that what you?
That's not what I do.
That's
but
not what you do.
Ashay was actually our treasurer, though.
Yes.
Yes.
it was.
Oh, okay.
for this year, my senior year, and my junior year, I was the treasurer, so I kept track of all the money.
Now, is it all like sponsor based, or do you have to do like fundraisers like everybody else does?
We do fundraisers as well.
We haven't done as many. We're going to expand in
Yeah.
the future.
Was
Okay.
one of the first years in a little while that we've had to do major fundraising.
Okay.
But even then, we were lucky to have lots of sponsors who stepped up in the school board, as Shannon said, that helped us out.
Because we're going to go tangent number one. I'm not going to look at this for a second, because one of the reasons why you may have needed sponsorship, I'm going to go out on a limb here, is you guys are nationally recognized. You were invited to the national competition, right?
Yes.
Is that a first for your team?
Yes, it was.
Woohoo! Happy dance. Okay, I'm sorry.
International, actually.
International.
International.
Wow. Even
Yeah.
better. So, did all three of you attend?
I did.
I did.
They
Okay,
did. I
they did.
unfortunately had family. It's during April vacation, so
okay. Now,
for us.
And we were given only 3-day turnaround, so it was very hectic getting everything organized.
oh,
If
by
I
the
can-
way,
yeah.
up you are.
Yeah.
Have fun in St. Louis.
Basically,
Yes.
what happens is every year, every team is required to compete in 2 district-level competitions,
Okay.
and that's around 40 teams apiece, I believe.
Yeah.
Backing up just a quick
yes.
second, how big is your team? How many members do you know?
Depends
Ballpark.
on the
Currently,
season.
it's around like 50. Like, it depends. Now we're getting a lot more members. My freshman year is probably around like 20, but now
Oh,
we
That's
start,
like big.
Yeah, we've grown.
Well, we
Yeah.
started this year with 70.
and now we've gone down to more like 50, or
Something, yeah,
of
40,
people who come.
something like that,
Yeah.
yes.
The few, the proud, the technically aware. Okay. So, okay, national competition.
Yes. So every year, every team is required to compete in 2 district competitions of about 40 teams apiece. And those are relatively local, like probably an hour's drive from wherever your team is, and you
Okay.
get to choose which ones you want to compete at. And depending on how well you do, you can move up to the next level, which is regionals. And that's about 60 teams. That's not necessarily in your state. In this case, it was the Northeast region as a whole,
Yeah.
I think.
And where was that?
That was at
WPI.
WPI.
Oh, okay.
And if you do well at that, then you can continue to the international competition, World Championships, which is in St. Louis, Missouri.
But each advancement isn't free. You have to pay. So we pay $5,000 to start off as a registration fee.
Holy crow.
That covers our 2 district events. Then if we get to WPI, our local regional, it would be another $5,000. Then once we
Now, is
qualify
that just
for
like an
World
entrance
Championship,
fee and
Yes.
then getting there? And
That does not
that's
include
not
parts.
included.
No.
It's
Just
these are all
registration.
entrance
Wow.
fees. So this year we paid about $15,000, $5,000 for initial entrance.
Do you at least get a
5,000
T-shirt out of it or something?
No, we pay for these.
Yeah,
You got to pay for those
we
too.
for them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So sponsor these guys, people.
Please.
Okay. Backing up before competitions, and yeah, see, this is why I have my notes that I'm not paying any attention to. You designed a robot this year that recycles, or recycle bins, or something.
Yes.
How do you get your ideas for what kind of robot you're going to build?
So what we've actually recently started doing, thanks to one of our new mentors, is that what we do is that we start off by looking at the game. There's on the first Saturday of January.
Okay.
It's the kickoff, and from there we find out what the competition's about. So then we talk about.
Okay.
We
so they
decide
like
what
tell
the
you
main
you need to
points.
build a robot
First-
that can throw a frisbee, or you
First
need a robot.
assigns us a broad challenge that we can take multiple parts of.
Oh. Can you give me an example of that?
So this year, sorry,
yeah,
one
so-
of you wanna? Nisha?
Oh, so like I was gonna say, a more like a less complicated version was 2 years ago. They would do this competition where you could either throw the frisbees, as you said, or climb a pyramid. So some robots from the more fancy teams could do both, or some robots, like our robot, could
Okay.
only do one. Some robots could only climb the pyramid.
Okay.
So it allows for a broad range of teams to be able to
Okay.
approach it.
Now do this, so frisbee pyramid, at the competitions, do they divide you into groups, or is just everybody on the same playing field?
It's one competition, like
Okay.
one objective. Like for that frisbee one, it's like you score frisbees, and it's all based on points. You get points for frisbees, you
Okay.
get points for climbing. But the way it works there is that it's one competition together. They're just different parts of it
Okay.
inside each game, each game roughly lasts around 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and a portion of autonomous where the robot works by itself, and then a portion where you're driving it. And it's 3 teams on each side, so it's 3v3.
Okay.
And those are
So
called
wait a minute, you have
alliances.
to like be able to remote control it and
Yes.
Yes.
let it go on its own?
It has 2 different modes.
Wow. That sounds complicated.
And every year we have 6 weeks to build this robot from the time that they issue it to the end of what we call build season.
Okay, so how do you learn how to build a robot? I mean, you're looking at someone who cried trying to do her analytic geometry homework. I cannot imagine trying to build a robot. So do you just rely on the internet? Do you have like sponsors that know how to be like iRobot or something to help you?
Well, first we have mentors who are
Okay.
very helpful. They're adults who are in the field of one of these many subjects, so
Okay.
electrical engineers or software people, all sorts of different things.
Okay.
Though what we mostly end up doing is having the older students teach the newer students what they know about the parts. And as Nusha said earlier, you come in with almost no knowledge of anything about robotics, and the older members teach you everything you need to know in preseason, which is from September to kickoff, the
Which
beginning
is
of build
January.
season. Yes, January.
Okay.
And at the beginning of the year, after our activity fair, when we have all the new members, we do a cycling route, so then they can look at all the different divisions we have: electrical, programming, mechanical, marketing. We used to have an arts division, but now there hasn't been as many members in that, so now it's just whenever people want to do art, they can. And there's a lot more than robotics that people get to see, and I think that's what surprises most people.
Yeah, because I thought it was all about, but you know, the whole marketing thing, the fundraising thing, the web design.
It's like
Do you-
a small business, basically.
Yeah.
We
Or a
have
large business.
we have 3 main divisions. So there's build, which is the group that just constructs the robot. Competition prep, which I believe Nusha will be leader of next year, and marketing.
So what does competition prep involve?
So even if we have a robot and it's funded, that doesn't necessarily mean anything if we can't perform at competition. So like the game, as Shannon said earlier, it's very broad. So it's about developing strategy, figuring out which teams we like and which teams we don't like. I'm serious. It's actually
No,
a
I
big deal.
understand that. I'm like, okay.
It's funny. It's
yeah.
funny. We have a whole app for it and everything.
You have an app for it. Wow.
Yeah, it's fun. But and making sure that our team looks good and performs well at competitions. So we do some fun stuff like we get hair dye and everyone has fire red hair for the competition.
I love it.
And we also make sure that we
How
have
do
a
you make your
working
hair
kit.
red?
The hairspray dye and a lot of hope.
Oh, okay.
I have it anyway.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm
Shannon
like,
got it
if
figured
you're
out.
blonde, I can see changing your hair color to red, but your hair's, you know, you guys, your
They
hair's so
make temporary
dark.
sprays that work pretty well.
Okay, so it's not a permanent thing.
We have team shirts and sweatshirts and a mascot and buttons that we pass out at the competition.
Excellent. So, oh, sorry.
Oh no, I wasn't saying
Okay,
anything.
I wasn't sure if you had anything else to add because I'm bouncing all around. At the competition, okay, so there are the 2 phases where, you know, you control the robot and then the robot is autonomous. Do they throw in little surprises at the competitions saying you need to, you know, change things or troubleshoot
Well, there's
or
always surprises based on what you see everyone doing. There's
Okay.
usually some people who do some enhancements in between. Like I know when we were going to our regional, we actually changed our robot a little bit to make it easier because even though they give us very little time
okay.
to do those enhancements in between each competition, you're only given 6 hours to take it out of its bag. This
Wow.
is to make sure no one has any unfair advantage or anything like that.
Okay.
And so we improved our robot then, and then it was based on what other people have done, and then they were also changing.
Okay.
But mainly what happens at the competition is that it's the game that was described to you unless there was some major rule change that they notified you early on in the build
Oh, okay.
season. And the only surprises you could say that happen are when the referees start calling different rules and stuff, because there are rules. There's a long rule book to this, and they
Okay.
have referees watching, calling fouls and stuff like that. and those can surprise you at times.
Okay.
There's-
Now, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Something that you might want to add to surprises is always things that happen with our robot that we're not expecting. So for example, this year, thankfully this only happened in practice, but it definitely could have happened in a competition. The main, the brain, so to speak, of the robot, called the Robo Rio, suddenly started malfunctioning and would shut off and refuse to turn back on for no reason. And we'll run into really strange issues like that, code that's been just copied oddly or misplaced, electrical parts that decide to stop working. One year we had parts of it in rougher challenges. The physical chassis of the robot will become mangled by other robots bashing into it. It's not supposed to be violent.
Okay, so it's like
it depends on the challenge.
Intentionally
Yeah.
a demolition derby, but okay.
It gets
The most
violent.
contact that's
yeah.
really there is like blocking, like let's say there's projectiles that you need to throw, blocking those, or like pushing robots out of the way, out of zones to decrease scoring and stuff like that.
Okay.
They have very specific rules on how long and in what way you're allowed to touch or contact other robots, but
Okay.
it still does sometimes get brutal.
And when it does, if a robot's broken on the field or something, it's always great that you can hear the entire crowd gasp. There's never every cheering. Everyone's like together. It's really is a family at these competitions.
And that is the
'Cause-
thing. Sorry.
Well, after that, everyone rushes to their pits. The pits is usually a 9 foot by 9 foot area. It depends on the
So
venue.
if like a robot
that-
breaks down, it's like a timeout, a big timeout, or
No.
No.
Continues.
Because they can't have that many, all the teams competing at the same time, there's that pit section where all the robots are. That's where you're doing your after-match like checkups,
Okay.
and when you're doing your minor fixes, stuff like that. That's basically where your team is housed during the 3-day competition. And so after a robot breaks, everyone's always rushing over there to help and stuff like that.
But that is the thing at competitions, that robotics competitions seem a lot like sports competitions. There's enormous cheering crowds with, the colored uniforms, people with the mascots and the hair paint and all that sort of thing. But there's no, if your robot is like up against a robot from another team that breaks in some terrible way, there's no, yes, it broke, we're defeating the other team. It's always
oh,
sad.
I'd be like doing
There
a
is
little happy
no-
dance inside.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Because you know how hard you've worked on your
Yeah.
robot, and
No.
it's heartbreaking to see someone else's work fall apart.
Yeah. Now, what would happen if something catastrophic, like, I'm not sure I forget what Shannon called it, but like the motherboard or something, all of a sudden broke? Do you have like spare parts with you?
Yes, we're always making sure that we have spare parts to get ready.
But you don't have like a backup robot?
No.
No.
Not them, okay.
We do have, between every round, we have pit crews, which
Okay.
go in and check the robot. So one crew from programming will come and make sure that everything is working properly. Each wheel spins when it's supposed to. Mechanical, make sure there aren't any nuts and bolts out of place. Electrical, make sure all the wires are properly plugged in, nothing's short-circuiting or being a disaster.
And another nice thing, as you said, if we lose a part or something, and as Shannon said, it's all like a family, is that if we do lose a part, we can always ask a neighboring team, or they'll even put it on the announcements in the pit, like, team 2876 needs part X, and you're sure that someone will bring it to you.
All of a sudden I have visions of the movie Planes, at the end. Did you guys see Planes? And everybody brings a piece to fix Dusty, and everybody's happy. Okay. We started talking about replacement parts. Where do you get, if you answered this already, I'm sorry, I'm finally looking at my list. Where do you get the parts themselves to initially build the robot?
So
Is there like a robot
these
store
are,
somewhere, or?
There are certain websites that first, not
Endorses.
endorses, good word, but they're not officially any specific source for parts. Some other robotics challenges involve parts like VEX, which is a set of parts. We don't have any sort of set. So sources like Andy Mark, McMaster Car. There's a number of online places where you can get different parts that are first acceptable.
Okay.
And there are certain ones that you can use, but there's a decent variety. So
Okay.
And then
how
when
do you
we
know what parts you need? Is there like a master list or something?
well,
or?
after like some time, you just kind of realize
know.
these are the best for these parts, stuff like that.
Okay.
It's all
So you look at what
passing
your
down
robot has to
information.
do, and you
Yeah.
work with your mentors saying, okay, we need it to do this, and you have to design it first before going out and buying the parts.
And FIRST also has guides on a general, here's what you would want to put in your electrical system, or here's a basic chassis.
And we
Okay.
also get parts from FIRST. That $5,000 entrance fee for the
Okay.
district events also includes what they call the kit of parts, which is a couple boxes of parts. That's pretty much the majority of
Like
the
the
cost.
starter
Though
pack.
it's
Yeah,
not,
it's
not enough to actually
Yeah.
build a full robot.
Okay.
it's just stuff that you're given each year to use, and
Okay.
we're always spending money outside onto the robot because you can't just use those parts.
Can you like steal previous year's robots' parts?
We do
We can
that.
use parts, but we can't build them in advance or take off full subsystems or full mechanisms from past robots. Everything needs to be built then.
Okay. Wow. How do they know if you do? No. So how do you transport your robot?
Depends on the competition.
Yeah.
It depends on the size of the robot too,
Yes.
doesn't it?
So we
How big?
have-
How big is this year's robot?
It's
So it's the
I should
size of a
24
small
inches.
car. No.
It's like
it's
it's
a golf
around
cart.
22 by 23 inches in like a square, and then about 6 feet high.
Wow.
Usually, what dimensions they give us is over the past 4 years, it's pretty much been consistent with 120 inches around as your frame perimeter, and then depending on the challenge, it's like how high can you go and stuff like
Now,
that.
do they limit how big you can make something so you don't have like this Godzilla?
The,
Yes.
size and weight.
the rule is that it has to be under a certain weight, and that when you put it on the field, it can be like it has to be in those dimensions that Ashay gave us. But there are some teams that'll make a robot that'll like extend out on the field, but that all has to be controlled for the programming.
And it also
Okay.
depends on the competition. Like this
Now,
year,
are you penalized if it doesn't meet those requirements,
we're not
or
allowed to compete.
You're not even allowed.
you're not
on the
allowed to
field.
compete? Okay.
At the beginning of each competition, you go through something called inspection, and they check over every part of your robot, each wire and connection, the measurements, if the frame is conductive, all sorts of different things. And if they find anything that's wrong, they will not allow you to be officially inspected and will not allow you to compete.
Wow.
And then they also check like finances to it. It's not just the robot. They have to make sure when we go to each competition, they need to see how much we spend on the robot, including outside parts. We usually spend about $2,000 to $3,000 on the robot, excluding what was given to us in the kit of parts.
Okay.
And then there's a certain limit to how much you can spend.
Okay.
And then they also look at like what software I'm using to go how our driver station, which is what we're using to control the robot, is set up, and making sure we're in compliance with all the rules that they've set forward.
Okay. Now, between each competition, do the tasks for the robot change, or is it like the same thing, or is it those extra surprises that they throw in? What makes each competition different other than the competitors?
That really is it, I think, for the most
Yeah.
part.
Okay.
So, for example, with the district competitions, they scored it a little differently this year, but you'd take your scores from each match and you got an average for your team. And I think our first place seed was around 70, is that right? 70?
For our first
For
district?
districts
For
in
Yeah.
general.
For districts, the first one was around 100.
Okay. Yeah, and in the regional competitions, if you had a score of anywhere around 100, you were in almost last place.
So wait, how are they scored then?
Well, because you're working with teams, when you
Okay.
get to the higher regionals, you're working with teams that have done better, so your total averages will be higher. And
Okay.
scoring, it goes based on year, but this year it was like your combined score when you're working together and try to stack totes and put on bins and try to throw noodles, stuff like that.
So you have to get the task done and see how the robot performs,
Yeah.
and efficiency, and whether or not it breaks, and all those little surprise things, how you perform in those.
The score is like very kind of objective almost, in that it's how much you get done regardless of.
Okay.
So like this year we were stacking recycling totes and recycling bins. And
Okay.
So your score was based on how many bins you stacked, how high they were, if there were totes on them, things like that.
Oh.
Not necessarily how you reach those goals, I guess.
But each robot isn't functioning alone. First, they have a big kind of idea to make sure that people working together.
Okay.
This year, between opposite alliances, you were stacking together to get a higher amount of points. The
So like
stack
you
that
could work
make
with
together.
a different team and build one stack?
They called it cooperation.
where you work with and against people. So I guess that is a sort of a surprise. Every time when you get to a competition,
So
they
you don't-
randomly assign you alliances of you and 2 other teams.
Okay.
And you compete with those teams for each round, and they're different for every round that you're in.
Okay.
And you get scored based on that team score. And whatever that team score is, that becomes part of your average. And every round you average out your team scores, or the team scores your robot was in.
Okay.
Each
All right.
each event in each competition is divided into 2 parts. There's the normal qualification rounds,
Okay.
where you're trying to build up those averages, get your rankings up high.
Okay.
And then there's the elimination rounds, where the top 8 seeds become alliance captains, and then through snake format they start to pick other teams, and then that's how you develop
they get
your
to choose.
teams.
It's like gym
Yeah.
class.
I would fail miserably at that.
That's why, as I said, so important. It's important for us to like set a go that you have to write down and take note of what teams you like and what teams you don't like, because this year at one of our district competitions we were captains, so we had to be informed and pick the team that we wanted to compete with.
Okay.
And Anusha was actually the leader of that, of scouting, which
a
is
lot
what
of
we
fun.
call it, watching the other robots.
Okay.
And you can't just rely on like who has the highest totals, because it's really about how your robots work together as well, or like who
Okay.
does this part of the game better. You may cover one part and now you need another part, and there's a lot more to it than just okay, top 3 scoring.
Yeah, you
Those
would
go
need an
together.
app for all of this, because I'm like, even a spreadsheet wouldn't.
No, it's
Yeah.
not nearly enough.
Okay, I'm
For
dating
example-
myself again.
For example, with this competition, we had there was stacking totes, which are the rectangular
Okay,
bins.
like the bins. Okay.
And then we had containers, which are the large, like trash bin style, cylindrical. And then you had pool noodles, which you could put in the cylindrical bins, and those were called litter. And different robots would be able to do different things. So the top scoring teams might all be tote stacking robots. But if you're going to get points, you need to put containers on top of the totes. So picking a high scoring team may not be good for you if your robot does totes, because you'll need one that does containers or one that does noodles as well.
Okay. And what did your robot do? The totes?
Ours did totes, barrels, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Did it
totes
do-
and barrels, and then
So you needed
different
a
ways
noodle
of-
person, a noodle
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, and then noodles. Well, in each competition, there's always some human involvement in the game as well. This year it was noodles that one person on the drive team. It's a 4-person drive team. There's the main pilot who's driving, a co-pilot who helps him drive, a alliance captain, or the
Okay.
drive team captain, who basically manages the strategy and the interaction between the teams on your alliance and the opposing alliance. And then there's the human player who, based on the game, does something different. This year they were the ones putting the totes into the field for the robots to pick up. They were the ones who were throwing noodles onto the field, and they were the ones who were putting noodles into the bins for
So if
the robots.
this,
here.
if that particular person or role is scattering the totes and the noodles all over the place, how do you get your robot to do that by itself? I mean, I can understand if you're controlling it, but
Well, the human, he's putting the totes, so there's a feeder station, and you had 2 options. You can either
Okay.
pick them up from what they call a landfill, which was
Okay.
just this huge array of totes put in different
Okay.
positions that was always a set way that you had to get to, or you could feed them in through the feeder station, and
Okay.
then the human player would just keep putting in totes that your robot would either pick off from the ground, take in right from the feeder station, or
okay. So you're
something like that.
you know that this is what your robot has to do before it go. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's not one of those little surprises.
And the autonomous mode, the part where the robot drives itself, is at the beginning of the competition.
Okay.
So at that point, none of the stacks have been made. Nothing is in your way for the most part.
Okay.
There are a few things you're allowed to manipulate, like barrels or totes you're allowed to place in certain places, but only specific ones. So most of it, you either know where it is or you've set it up so that your robot is going
Okay,
to
so it's
get
not
it.
like completely random.
No.
No.
Okay, because I'm like, wow.
Well, you You could, though, actually do something like that. Our robot has a large number of sensors which allow it to understand its environment better.
Yeah, and that doesn't just help it during the autonomous period. It also helps when people are driving, because you can use those sensors to help you identify different things that are going on or help you do something with your strategy.
So this year, for example, we had something that allowed us to tell, we had an arm on the front of our robot that lifted the totes up and down.
Okay.
And we had a sensor that let us know exactly how high up that was at any time. And we also had a camera looking through robot's eye view, so to speak, so that the drivers at their station could look and see what the robot saw, which when you have enormous piles of stacks in front of you, oftentimes between you and the robot, is very helpful, so you can see and line it up.
Oh,
And
I hadn't
then
thought about that.
When you're playing it, well, in past competitions, this year it was kind of different, but in past competitions, you're on this side, there's a field, a divider, or a hypothetical divider, and then the other field, and your robot would be on the other field while you're controlling it from here. So you'll be controlling it when you're at least like 50 feet away. So that camera really comes in handy, or
Okay.
like Shannon said, this year it was more about there's so much on the field.
And there are other types
How
of
did you know?
Sorry.
Just back it up. How did you know to put a camera on there? Is it because of past experience, or did
Well-
one of you guys say, "Oh, we need to see this," or one of the advisors like, "How are you gonna see that?"
It's something that you can tell once they introduce the game as well, and then
Okay.
it was also something we kind of discuss with each other. Would we want a camera? How would this help? And then
Okay.
it's something that it's somewhat standard. A lot of people use cameras,
Okay.
but then with the other sensors like sonars or we don't use infrared.
Limitometers?
So with like
Potentiometers?
sonars, potentiometers, and stuff like that, it's like
okay.
it's based on how you're doing how your robot will function.
Okay.
And that's usually, Shay and I are the heads of the programming and electrical divisions, respectively. And our divisions work together and talk about what sensors do we need, what sensor to be useful, how can we put those on, and how can we program those to make it work for this year.
Wow. My mind is just ready to like explode. So we may have done this already, but can you guys walk me through step by step what a typical year is like with the robotics club? Like, okay, you get the assignment, and how do you divide up the work, and who does what, and where does all the marketing come in, and when does all the marketing come in? And how do you know how much money you have to raise?
So, in general, it's very difficult because there's a lot of things.
And that's not on here, so don't worry about it.
There's a lot of things going on at once. We're not hesitating because we don't know, but because there's so much to say.
Okay.
So usually, marketing, for example, will start. They will make sure that we have enough money to get the parts we need to begin the season. It's not necessarily in a linear order. But
Okay.
we'll have something like CAD team or schematics, computer-aided design for CAD.
Okay.
And we have a group of people who go through and make sure the robot is planned out before it's built. And we also have different team members who are helping to do that, like the engineering lead and different positions like that.
Okay.
And then each division has their own turn with that. Do you guys?
Yeah. So for programming, well, first of all these groups, some things have to follow each other, but there's always each group always has something to work on.
Okay.
There's not really any downtime until it's all done. And so for programming, what we do is that first of all, before competition even begins, like the other groups, you teach the new members, get people reacquainted, and just set the stage for
Well,
when.
plus technology changes so fast, so even if you are a returning member, there's probably like a boatload of stuff that you have to learn.
And then setting up all like software and whatever you can before, and then once the competition video rolls around, now it's build season, we have 6 weeks to build, and then after we've already set up the design with our team, and we have our respective tasks, then we're like, okay, now we have to get this ready. There's some things we need to install. We will have a robot that does this. For programming, it's kind of different because a lot of the times people think the order goes that you build it, then you wire it, then you program it, but it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
A lot
Of course not.
What we were doing earlier, which I'm glad to see has changed as the years have gone by, is that in my freshman year, it was like we came up with the design, now programming, do what you think you can do to make it the best you can. Now it's a lot more like, okay, let's think about programming and everything while we're designing. Okay. And then so for programming, it's a lot more about logic, how you're using these things. So it's not like, okay, look this up and learn that and then just type it in. You need to know when to put it and stuff like that. So there's usually a lot of trial and error with us as well, just because of some of the... Yeah, there's usually a lot of debugging. That's how every programming is.
Now, just pause for a second. Coming from someone who hasn't attempted to program since long before any of you were born, is there like a specific language that you use to program?
For first, you can use either LabVIEW, which is a drag and drop, C++, or Java, and our team uses Java.
Okay, now where do you learn to program computers? Is that also like a course in school that you can take for computer programming? Or is it
in schools?
Does any of this relate to like your real academic world?
It does.
Definitely.
What stuff that we do definitely helps. Like me programming at Robotics definitely helped me understand programming for like AP Computer Science, which was done in Java as well. Oh, okay. But it's really different when working with it though, because in school it's about the basics. It actually turns out being the opposite in a high school setting. Okay. Mostly because in high school it's like we need to get people interested in some of these, so you're going to do the applied first. But with programming, the first competition they do this thing called command-based programming for Java. So it's done to make it easier for us, because it would be unrealistic to think that high schoolers can code a full robot by themselves.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking going.
So a lot of it is done by ourselves, but command-based is what was done by WPI. It was a partnership between WPI and the first organization, and so it's called WPI Library, and so there's some functions set up and there's some guides to help you along the way, but it's more like you see all these commands, you kind of understand, okay, if I really wanted to do this, then I would have to work with this, but then you have to figure out, okay, how do I use it? They give you the syntax and stuff, but then that's why it's a lot more about your logic. What are you doing? And that's more of the applied version of it. You need to just see how it piece things together, kind of. Except it's not like it's laid out for you in any sense.
That's why it's the whole trial and error thing.
Yeah.
But every division is amazingly different. So while programming has sort of from what you sound like, a set of guidelines to help you through things, there's mechanical, who every year there's a basic, like the wheels of the robot, the chassis. You have a general idea of how it works, but the shape and the structure can be completely different every year. And while it is the same metal parts that they're using, they're in enormously different orientations. Whereas you have a division like electrical, who we mostly do the same thing every year, though it depends on what parts we want to use, what sensors, how to orient them and lay them out.
And then for mechanical too, even though there's same parts in electrical too, they have the same parts, but based on what we're doing, they have to use different things at different times. And so it really, each team has something different every year to look forward to. It's never something that seems autonomous or something that you can just know what to do right away.
Now, kind of relating back to the whole STEM thing, science, engineering, technology, and math. So we got the engineering and technology down. Do you guys does mathematics come into play at all?
We do math.
You do math.
Well, we should probably do more math when we're actually planning our robot, because there's a lot of physics involved, and this is something we've actually started doing this season. which was actually doing some of the math out, and a lot of other teams do this too, is actually sit down and figure out how much things need to weigh, how much power things need before they're built, so that everything can run well. And of course, like Ashaya's treasurer used math figuring out our finances.
Because I just keep thinking of, people my age going, when am I going to use algebra?
Engineering uses a lot of math.
We do end up, so for example, we had a whole thing where we had to figure out how to balance the weight on our robot. And especially, you have a square that drives around. And on its own, you can kind of figure out how, okay, if you put everything on the back, it will
the center
tip
of
over.
gravity thing. And
There's things like that. But there's also, we're going to be lifting up totes, which have a certain weight to them. So now you're adding things of varying levels every time. How do you make sure it still doesn't tip when you have 4 or 7 pound apiece totes on the front of your robot? Will that tip you over? Will that be bad? And then once you figure out how much you're lifting, how do you have a motor that compensates for that? So do you have a amazingly fast and powerful motor, or do you have one that has a lot of torque and lifting power to it? And what would be the best kind, and what's the mathematical balance between those?
And then we also, when you lift the totes, you're going to be moving them, so you don't want them to fall back down because of gravity. So one of the things...
one would hope.
Yeah. So one of the things with programming is that we did a PID system. PID is proportional integral derivative. It's this control loop that you're used to pretty much manage things. And so, as you can tell by integral derivative and proportional, it has a lot of math to it. And
Yeah.
what most people
I'm a
end up
psychology major over here, okay?
what most people end up doing for PID is that there's a methodical way to do guess and check with it, and so based on you put up a proportional, then cut that in half, that's your integral, then you start playing around with the derivative and stuff like that. And so
and I just understood every word you said.
The PID actually, if let's say you have a set point on your elevator and you wanted to get there and you didn't want to overshoot or anything, so the PID helps you determine what speed to go at and what rate of speed for what rate of increasing speed and what rate of decrease you should have to get there right at that point at the fastest possible way. And so we could use that for keeping our totes up and stuff like that, where you can get around without using the math, but it really helps.
You'll probably get a better robot.
Yeah.
Now, we're taking into consideration the weight of the totes. Now, what about the stuff that goes in the totes?
The totes are actually empty.
So it's not necessarily an issue for the competition. Okay. I just keep thinking back to when they built the UMass Amherst Library, they took into consideration the building itself, which is 50, 100 stories. I don't know, it's really tall. They forgot to take into consideration the weight of the books. You're laughing, you heard this before, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's like, hello? So, that's why I was like, do you need to worry about the stuff going into the totes? Okay, so where does your role next year is to be kind of scouting out the competition?
And planning our approach to it.
And planning the approach. Okay, because I'm like, the scouting out the competition you can't really do until the competition.
Yeah.
Well, Anusha would also be in charge of making sure that we have a functioning drive team. So people who work together well and are well trained, so making sure we have the best people for that.
That's actually a big part of the competition too. One thing we're always trying to do is build a robot not as quickly necessarily, but as efficiently as possible. So the drive team has a maximum amount of time to practice with it, because you can have a great robot, but if you can't drive it well on the field, it's useless. And
the drive team, the pilots.
The pilots, yeah. So we have proper tryouts for that and everything.
You have tryouts?
Driving is exciting.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, wow.
It's a lot of pressure too, though.
And you don't want them to turn it into the demolition derby.
Yeah.
You don't want to get the nice aggressive
That $5,000 robot running into a wall.
When you're on the drive team, though, I've been on it since my freshman year, and there is a lot of pressure, because not only are you battling the clock, but you're determining how well a robot that you and all your peers spent 6 weeks making. All that effort has to go in, that has gone into making this robot, and now you are what's left to make sure it does well and kind of succeed.
It all comes down to you. No pressure.
I was on drive team for one of our smaller competitions. I was the robot driver, and it's amazingly high pressure. So our drivers this year did an amazing job, but after each competition and during, they were
A little stressed.
just fried. I personally will never do it again, not voluntarily. And I have a huge amount of respect for the people who do drive it. It's really as much a personal thing as it is a robot thing. There's a huge amount of working with each other and communicating and creativity, as well as just putting parts together and doing a lot of math.
Now, along the lines of, I will never drive a robot again, might fall on you. Do you kind of make sure that at some point everybody kind of understands everybody else's role or tries everybody else's role so they do appreciate? You know, because sometimes you don't appreciate what the other person does until you actually do it.
That's one thing that pretty much everyone on the team who's an upperclassman is focused on, is making sure everyone gets to experience, not necessarily like Shannon did where she was in a high pressure situation, but experience what everyone else gets to experience. So like I was in electrical for my freshman this year too, and but I still went to the other divisions, especially at the beginning. One of the big things we encourage, and Shannon, I'm sure, can go on, she's a huge advocate of this, is the idea of kind of going around to each division and spending a day or two there and giving it a chance before settling on one.
Okay.
Because some people switched, their sophomore or junior year and found something they really loved within a different division.
Okay.
It's a very tenuous balance, though, because for the first season of robotics, for pre-season, first several months, you're going around and you're learning. So the people who are upperclassmen are teaching all different things each day. And if you miss one of the days, then you'll have an incomplete learning experience, which makes it more difficult to go
You're
from one
missing
division to
pieces
another.
of the puzzle.
Yes. And then when you get to my age, junior, or in my case, sophomore year, by sophomore year, I had to lead electrical because all of our seniors and juniors had graduated.
Oops.
So I didn't have a chance to leave after that. And hopefully in the future we'll make sure that there's more communication and working together between divisions, but that is something we've struggled with a lot.
Also, hopefully, since you guys are now, doing like the mentoring program in the middle school and elementary schools, hopefully you're bringing up people that have the experience in all the aspects, so you're not pigeonholed and, well, I did it and nobody else knows how to do it.
This was our first year that anyone from our previous programs had come up to the high school, actually.
Yeah.
We started with just
okay.
elementary school, and as of this year, some of our freshmen have been in our robotics programs before. And thankfully, now that we've expanded to all the elementary schools and the middle school, this will be a more common thing, which will be interesting to get used to.
Yeah. Next year will be the first. I started mentoring my freshman year, so it's just crazy to think that the fifth graders who I was mentoring, the ones who were just amazing to be with, are going to be in the robotics club next year.
Oh.
But it's kind of odd that once you graduate, that year is that's one.
Yeah.
You need to like come back as an alumni and
Yeah.
go to the competitions with the bright red hair and.
Most of our members talk about wanting
I was
to mentor.
not implying anything.
Joking, sorry.
I had another question and I totally lost. Yeah. Okay. You were talking about how much of a time commitment is this?
A huge one.
Yes.
Can you
Yep.
do anything else? Can you sleep? I mean,
In high school, generally, no.
I mean, like in any situation. But some people will find something that they really love that's kind of short-lived within the team's role and only come for those parts. Like
okay.
as part of the scouting, I said, as Shannon said, and I said, we have an app. So I have a couple of friends who are really into app development and web design. So they all came for a few weeks and they really, really love web design and app development. And they were awesome enough to make this really great app for us.
neat.
And then they weren't as interested in everything else, so they just clocked out. But like many of us, we spend hours and hours and hours.
During build season, we meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 3 hours on each of those, 5:30 to 8:30, and Saturday from 9 to 5. That's
Wow.
for 6 weeks. Technically 6 weeks, unless we have
Yeah.
more competitions, which case.
Then
Theoretically.
Yes.
it goes very long.
So our build season this year didn't end until 2 weeks ago, basically.
Yeah. And that was very different because this first year we actually went far at all. My first 2 years they didn't have the district events, so
Okay.
it was straight to regional. So it was one event. You
Oh,
either
okay.
go farther or you're done. So those first 2 years we didn't make it past. Last year we didn't make it past, and then this year we went past 3 levels and made it all into
Wow.
internationals. And like it's been really great how much we've improved as well, because my freshman year there was only about like 20 kids that came. The postseason there was only 5 kids. It was me and like
Wow.
4 other kids who were showing up after, and we were the backup robot for this for the eliminations. Then the next year we make the quarterfinals, but our team is still somewhat smaller and smaller than it is now. And then last year we made quarterfinals in both our district events, and that was it. We didn't move on. This year we go into internationals, then we go into internationals, and it's 3.
And that's
It's
the top.
Interstellar.
events.
No.
Yeah. Another big thing that we've improved in, as Ashay said, is like our prominence within the town. So when I joined the club my freshman year, I honestly had no idea that we even had one until the activity fair. And now when we go and not necessarily mentor, but if we even talk to middle school and elementary school students, they're generally aware that we have a team. And that's pretty awesome. So
And you got the cool shirts.
And we've also improved, and this is something a lot of other teams are still struggling with, and not just teams, but in engineering in general, is the number of women who are involved in it. In our team, my first year there were 5 of us out of 20 or 30 members, and most of the others besides me couldn't come to most of the meetings. And now we have a third or half of our team is women.
it's at least 50-50.
And of
Yeah.
the main 5 leadership positions next year, 1, maybe 2 will be male.
Wow. You know what, guys? We're out of time! See? But I want to thank you all, thank the 3 of you guys for coming on the show, guy and ladies. Best of luck, graduation. Best of luck to you guys. Hopefully you will continue the science and engineering backgrounds and pursue those fields, because you're right, we do need more women in science. I really admire you guys for all that work, because you are looking at someone who was afraid to take calculus. So, and I went to a school where I didn't have to take calculus. So I really admire all the work that you're doing, and I'm very proud of you for making it to, international competition? And now I'm really out of time. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. And I will see you around town. Enjoy this wonderful weather. Good night.